You think your silence means nothing. You think they're out there, living life, unbothered, forgetting you. But here's what they won't tell you. The moment you went silent, something shifted. It started quietly. A pause. A delay in their routine. A moment of unexpected emptiness. And it grows. Every hour of your silence starts to echo. It creeps into their thoughts at night, shows up in the quiet between conversations, and whispers questions they don't have answers for. This silence, it's not weakness. It's the mirror they've been avoiding. It reflects everything they've done and everything they fear. And now, the silence they once thought they wanted becomes unbearable. You're not invisible. You're unforgettable. And your silence is the proof. You're not texting, you're not begging, you're not explaining. And in that stillness, they're starting to lose the one thing they thought they'd always control: your attention. If you've ever wondered what your silence does to them, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happens inside their mind when you say nothing at all, and why staying silent may be the loudest decision you'll ever make. Why silence is psychological power. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a language of its own. When someone who used to hear from you daily suddenly hears nothing, it doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, silence creates space. And that space becomes a psychological battlefield. Because in that space, there are no distractions, no words to argue with, no texts to interpret, just them and their thoughts. Most people assume that if you're not reaching out, you must have moved on. But psychologically, silence does something far more powerful. It becomes a mirror. It forces them to confront themselves without the buffer of your attention. The things they said, the way they acted, how they pushed you away. Now those memories come flooding back with no reassurance to cover them up. And in that gap, discomfort grows. We are wired to seek closure, to resolve unfinished emotions. When you stay silent, you deny that closure. You deny validation. You deny the comfort of knowing they still matter to you. And that discomfort? It begins to eat away at their ego. The silence you hold becomes the evidence they never expected, that you're no longer under their control. You're choosing peace over conflict, distance over drama. That's not weakness. That's emotional mastery. And that's why silence is more than ignoring someone. It's resetting the entire dynamic. They start to question, why aren't they chasing me? Have they moved on? Did they stop caring? These questions build pressure, and the longer you stay silent, the more explosive their internal storm becomes, because silence isn't quiet. It's the sound of your boundaries speaking for you. Number 1, silence attacks the ego. The ego craves certainty. It feeds off control, attention, and reassurance. When someone is used to you reacting, responding, explaining, they feel powerful. They believe they matter more than they actually do. But when you go silent, you remove all of that. You take away their favorite source of ego validation, your energy. Suddenly, they're left in a void. No confirmation, no reaction, no proof that they still matter to you. And that void, it's dangerous to their ego. It creates anxiety. They start making assumptions. They ask themselves questions they're not ready to answer. Why haven't they said anything? Did I push them too far? Are they really done this time? Their confidence starts to crack. The silence becomes a threat, not because of what you're saying, but because you're saying nothing. That nothingness holds power. It forces them to see the reality of who they are without your validation. And often, they don't like that version. The ego hates being ignored. It interprets silence as rejection and rejection as danger. Their mind scrambles to regain control, but they don't know how. That's when they start posting more, stalking your profile, asking mutual friends. Because the ego can't stand uncertainty, and your silence creates an endless amount of it. When you say nothing, they feel everything, not because you're hurting them on purpose, but because you've stopped giving them what they took for granted. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is not weakness, it's control. Number 2, it forces them into reflection. When you stop talking, they start thinking, loudly, obsessively, because now there's nothing left to distract them from themselves. Your silence leaves a gap they're forced to fill with thoughts, memories, and guilt. They replay every argument, every message, every look on your face. They ask themselves what went wrong, and more importantly, what they did to cause it. Silence makes space for self-reflection, and most people aren't ready for that. That's why they'd rather argue than be ignored, because fighting means you still care. Silence means you've stepped back, and that terrifies them. It strips them of the illusion of control. And in its place, they find a mirror that won't look away. They start feeling the things you felt when you were waiting for them to show up. They start realizing how heavy silence feels when you're on the receiving end. The reflection becomes sharp. It cuts into their justifications. It reveals the emotional damage they caused. And they can't blame you anymore. They're alone in this storm. That reflection becomes uncomfortable. But it's the kind of discomfort that changes people. Whether they admit it or not, your silence is making them face the truth, maybe for the first time. Number 3, it reverses the power dynamic. When a relationship ends or begins to fall apart, one person often ends up chasing while the other person pulls away. You might have been the one sending long texts. You might have begged for clarity, cried on read messages, waited all night for a reply that never came. But silence is the moment you stop chasing. And when that happens, everything shifts. Because silence flips the entire power dynamic, suddenly they're the one left wondering, they're the one who feels ignored. The emotional roles reverse. You take your energy back and they feel it like a void. That void used to be filled with your words, your apologies, your efforts, but now it's empty. And that emptiness speaks volumes. Their mind begins to spiral. What happened? Why the sudden coldness? Are they really done this time? They start checking your online status, watching your stories, asking mutual friends what's going on with you. Why? Because silence strips away the attention they thought they'd always have. It reminds them that you're no longer emotionally available, and that scares them. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking patterns. You're no longer reacting, and that makes them feel powerless. They used to pull your strings. Now those strings are gone, and all that's left is stillness. That stillness forces them to realize they don't have control anymore. And for someone who's used to controlling the emotional tone of the relationship, that's a terrifying realization. Silence is not revenge. It's a reset. You're reclaiming your time, your space, your dignity. And that power reversal? It's the first sign that healing has begun. Number 4, it reveals their true intentions. When you go silent, you create space, and space reveals truth. The people who genuinely cared about you will respond to your silence with concern. They'll wonder if you're okay. They'll reach out sincerely. They'll want to reconnect from a place of love, not control. But the ones who only wanted to win, to manipulate, or to dominate your emotions, they'll react very differently. They'll get angry. They'll try to guilt trip you. They'll throw subtle jabs like, "Wow, guess you moved on quick, or you clearly never cared. That's not love speaking. That's their ego panicking. When you were always available, they never had to question your loyalty. But now, your silence is forcing them to look at themselves, and many people can't handle that mirror. They get defensive. They act out. They accuse you of being immature, dramatic, or cold, but all you're doing is protecting your peace. Silence removes the mask. It strips away all the surface-level games and exposes what's underneath. Someone who loves you will come back with humility. Someone who only misses the control will come back with manipulation. And here's where your power truly shows. When you stay silent long enough to see who they really are without your emotional supply. Anyone can say they miss you. Anyone can say, I've changed. But silence forces action. It reveals whether they're trying to reconnect out of guilt, loneliness, or genuine growth. That's the difference between someone who regrets losing control and someone who regrets losing you. Your silence isn't meant to punish them. It's meant to protect you. Let it do its job. Let it clear the air. Let it show you, without words, who really deserves to stand beside you in your healing. You don't need an apology wrapped in manipulation. You need truth. And truth doesn't need to be chased. It reveals itself in the silence. Number 5. They begin to crave your energy. Your energy was their comfort. Your texts, your laughter, your concern. It fed something in them. Maybe they didn't realize it when they had it, but now that it's gone, they feel the loss like a slow ache. Silence creates scarcity, and scarcity creates value. When you stop giving them what they once took for granted, they begin to crave it. Not just miss you, crave the feeling they got from being wanted, from being seen, from being needed. This craving isn't always about love. Sometimes it's just their ego starving. When you go quiet, they begin to feel unimportant. They wonder if you're over them, if someone else is getting the attention they used to have. That uncertainty breeds obsession. They start replaying old conversations, overanalyzing your last post, wondering what you're thinking and why you've gone so quiet. This is the moment your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. You're no longer feeding their ego, and now they feel the hunger. But here's the key. You don't rush back in. You don't text just because they might be hurting. You remember that you're not here to serve their emotional needs at the cost of your own. Their craving is not your cue to return. It's confirmation that your energy was powerful all along. Let them feel what it's like to live without it. Let them remember that your love was a privilege, not a guarantee. Because once they realize what they lost, only then can they understand your true value. Number 6. It gives you the upper hand long-term. Silence is not just a short-term strategy. It's a long-term position of power. When you choose not to react, not to explain, not to chase, you're doing something most people can't. You're mastering emotional control. Over time, this control becomes strength, and that strength builds respect, not just from them, but from yourself. The moment you stopped begging, questioning, or trying to be understood, you took back the upper hand. They may not realize it right away. At first, they may think you're playing games. But as days pass, your consistency becomes louder than any text could be. You're not doing it for attention. You're doing it because you've evolved. They'll start wondering why you're so composed, why you're no longer reacting the way you used to. That mystery, that calm, they feel it, and it shakes them. Eventually they reach out, not because they're stronger, but because you are. You'll notice the tone shift. Suddenly, they're curious, then anxious, then desperate. Because silence, when held with discipline, breaks even the most confident ego. But here's your real power. When they do come back, you get to choose. You're not the one hoping for a reply anymore. You're the one evaluating if they're even worth your energy. You're not seeking closure. You already gave that to yourself. That's the moment everything flips. So, keep holding the silence. Let time reveal who they really are, and more importantly, who you've become. Because silence isn't just quiet, it's strategy, and it puts you in full control of your story. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence makes me unshakable. What happens when they finally break? It starts with hesitation, a late-night view of your story, a liked post from 3 weeks ago, a comment that feels just a little too intentional. And then it happens. A message, short, casual, but loaded with tension. Hey, or just thinking about you, or the classic, hope you're doing well. This isn't just a text, it's a symptom, a crack in the armor. The ego that once felt powerful in silence now feels powerless without your attention. Your silence forced them to look inward, and they didn't like what they saw. So they reach out, not from strength, but from discomfort. Not because they're healed, but because they're haunted. Haunted by your absence, by your growth, by the realization that you didn't need them to move forward. And here's the truth. You already won. Not because they texted, not because they miss you, but because by the time they broke their silence, you had already risen. You had already stepped into your peace, your power, your healing. That message isn't a victory, it's a mirror, a reflection of how far you've come and how much they've stayed the same. Now you hold the power. You get to decide. Not from emotion, not from longing, but from clarity. Do you respond, or do you rise higher? Do you invite them back into your world, or do you keep your peace protected? This is where the transformation happens. Not in them, but in you. The silence that once felt heavy now feels like freedom. You didn't just survive the silence, you mastered it. And that mastery cracked the ego that thought it would never need you again. Let this be your reminder. Your silence was never empty. It was filled with growth, strength, and evolution. They finally broke, but you finally became unbreakable. While they wrestle with ego, confusion, and silence on their end, your role is not to wait. Your role is to evolve. Silence is not a pause button on your life. It's a portal, a powerful space to reclaim your energy, rebuild your identity, and return to yourself. You don't sit by the phone. You sit with your thoughts. You sit with your healing. You focus on becoming someone that even you admire when no one's watching. Get active. Pour your emotions into something that gives back. Start reading. Move your body. Journal your growth. Wake up and choose yourself before you check for messages. Every moment you spend building yourself is a moment they feel your absence even more deeply. Your silence becomes louder, not by staying quiet, but by becoming better in the quiet. You don't become powerful by waiting for them to reach out. You become powerful by reaching into your own life and finally showing up. Start projects, reconnect with friends, reconnect with you, because when you are focused on becoming the best version of yourself, their return, if it ever happens, no longer shakes you. It becomes optional. Don't think of silence as revenge. Think of it as respect. Respect for your time, respect for your healing, respect for the future you're building without needing anyone's validation. You're not proving anything to them. You're proving everything to yourself. Remember, the version of you who begged, pleaded, over-explained, that person is gone. In silence, a new one is born. Stronger, clearer, calmer. They feel your silence, but you feel your growth. That's the difference now. This journey wasn't about making them regret. It was about making yourself proud. You didn't just stay silent, you stayed strong. You chose not to beg, not to chase, not to explain, and in doing so, you reclaimed a version of yourself that's powerful, grounded, and finally, free. Silence is not weakness. It's not revenge. It's self-respect. And every second you stayed quiet, you were sending a message louder than any words ever could. I am not desperate for anyone who can live without me. They might come back. They might not. But by now, you know, your healing is not tied to their return. Your peace does not wait for their reply. The truth is, you didn't lose them. You lost someone who couldn't value your presence. And in that loss, you found the most important person, yourself. So as this video ends, I want you to make one final decision. Not about them, but about you. Decide to protect your energy, to honor your journey, and to never let someone else's silence speak louder than your worth ever again. If this message hit your heart like this video, subscribe for more powerful healing content and drop this final affirmation in the comments. My silence is not a gap, it's my growth. Because your next level doesn't begin when they text you back. It begins the moment you finally choose yourself. You're not waiting anymore. You're rising. And I'm proud of you.